So there's this strange thing about me and my self-healing journey and the ability for me to manifest the life that I'm currently living. And the strangest thing is that I welcome being triggered. I know that sounds like, what? What are you saying? It's my dog taking drinks back there. What I am saying is that early in my life, I used to run from uncomfortable moments. And by run, I don't like literally mean run. I mean, the easy way to be me is to be quietly outstanding or quietly good or good enough so that the teacher doesn't call on you. But when you turn in your work from, 3, 4, 5 weeks of not being called on and you get all of the questions correct and the bonus problems, and I'm talking about, junior high, high school, when the trauma of my sister's passing happened. It's what is going on over there? You clearly have answers. And that was back when I don't know what they're doing in school nowadays, but that was back when you were writing essays and they had to be thoughtful and considerate and they had to tie people, different points in history. And so what does that mean for the future and what's happening today? All of the thought process. And I mentioned another one of my videos that I used to love to read and write. Used to, because that thing that you love, when you decide, okay, I'm going to go do more of that, and you haven't quite dealt with yourself and why it is that you play small, to be ushered into playing big is triggering. So when I was in grad school, the master's was a master's in biology. I ended up being awarded the best thesis for that year when I graduated in 2014. I ended up applying only to one school because I wanted to do it was called Bridges to the Doctorate at that time, where they were trying to increase the number of minorities applying to STEM programs. Neither here nor there. I don't care about your thoughts about DE and I. I actually was scholarly, okay? And what the program, and I don't think people recognize this, is that it's often that quote unquote minorities, I really don't like that term because we internalize it as meaning like we're a small sample of, or we don't see ourselves here, so maybe we can't quite belong or fit in. Like that's the way it's internalized. So, check out the book Whistling Vivaldi. I believe that's what it's called. But it talks about when you use terms like underrepresented minority, you trick the brain into playing small. And so in high school, I wasn't necessarily playing small intentionally. I actually was grieving my sister. I willed myself to excel in school because for her, learning and academics came very easy. For me, it was something that I had to be interested in. I had to dedicate myself. And so what I ended up doing is, like I said in previous video, I ended up following a career trajectory that she wanted to follow instead of what I wanted to do, because I couldn't identify myself in academia. It was like, I mean, really, I just want to plant plants and that's it. Like sit at my house and not be bothered with people. That story comes full circle. So I get into school on a full academic ride with the idea that maybe I'll do something in healthcare because, again, that was what everybody else was doing when they were getting degrees in biology, chemistry, biochemistry. So why not? Only to be triggered and find out, girl, that is not for you. It's not for you. You can't do it. Currently, our dog is ill. The going to the vet with the blood and the drainage and all, it's just, it's too much. I just want her to be okay, and I just want to stop crying because I can tell that she's in pain. That's how I am. And as a doctor, a nurse, you can't be that involved right? Like you have to be stoic in front of patients. Yes, there are patients and doctors who cry with their patients, but I'm saying as in a rule of thumb, if you know it's bad for the person you're looking at, you're not going to be like, boo hoo 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 girl, it ain't gonna work out for you. Like, no, that's not your coach, your high school football coach does not tell you, oh well, we're down 3 points. You guys are losers. We're done. We're done here. And if they are, it's not a good coach, right? So went to school, somehow found myself in offensive plant research because, again, I mentioned I was traumatized, triggered by my sister passing away when I was 15. I went to New Jersey to work on cadavers. It created a whole thing for me. And so I started to look for alternative careers in science. Ended up taking a long walk at school. It was in Mississippi, so it's country, okay? Like it's a long walk. I took a long walk from the back where the dorms were that I stayed in to the front of campus because I called my mom, was like, I don't want to do any of this stuff. And she was like, I don't know why you're calling me. You better figure out what you're going to do. And whatever it is, it's going to require you to continue the degree that you're doing because you've already done 1 year. So you're not wasting anybody's money, definitely not my money. Meanwhile, she wasn't really paying. I was on full ride. And two, you got to get a degree in something that's going to pay you because that's also what we're taught. Like, get a job where you will be paid. So, degree choice was biochemistry. So I walked from the back to the front of campus and I hit the agriculture building. So Alcorn State University, first and foremost, is an agriculture school. We were created in we're I think 1871, but we are what's called like an 1890s school. So a lot of funding goes towards agriculture. This is really good because I also mentioned that my sister in the previous video, she wanted to be a veterinarian. And so I went down there, I saw like the animals and stuff. And then I remembered how much I love dogs, like every dog that we have in our lives between my parents and me. I brought them. So that should tell you something about myself. So, excuse me. I go up there. My mom was like, I don't know how you're going to figure it out, but I'm going to tell you this. Read everything. Start talking to people. And whatever you do, you're not changing your major, but you can figure out how you can do something within that. Why did she tell me that? Because that's exactly what I did. On the bulletin board was a notice about a fellowship for the National Science Foundation. I don't remember what the fellowship was called, but basically it was $24,000. If you were awarded, they paid you $1,000 a month. Okay, again, follow me, people. This was 2009 to 2012. That was a lot of money for a college kid. I thought I was balling. I read the flyer. It said who to see in the ag building. I walked right over there to his door. I knocked and I said, hey, I don't know anything about agriculture. The man was like, yes, you do. And I was like, no, I don't. He said, you absolutely know something. And I said, what are you saying to me? Like, I'm telling you, my major is biochemistry. So this started to change the way I thought about how to make money, how to choose a career, how to pivot career fields and industries. Because he said, agriculture is every bit of science that you could ever imagine. And I was like, what? He said, agriculture is every bit of business that you could imagine. And I said, huh? What? Like, what are you saying to me? So he pulls, because back in the day, they had a catalog, like physical paper copy catalog where you went through classes. So he pulled it out and he started to show me the different classes. And he said, well, which one of these just kind of piques your interest? Agricultural economics, international econ. I took that class, loved it. Plant breeding, plant genetics, like all of that. So he says, okay, I know a guy. I'm going to take you over there. You're going to talk to a man named Dr. Mingao. I believe he's now at Texas something. Prairie View. And he tells me, get in the car. He drives me, because I told y'all it's a long campus. He drives me all the way back and walks me into a lab. And I start talking to this man who happened to be a graduate of the PhD program in plant biology from Penn State. Why is this significant? If you're liking the content that I'm talking about right now, you can go back and look at the other videos. But my initial PhD attempt was in plant biology at Penn State. So Dr. Gal talks to me, and we called him Ming, Dr. Ming. Dr. Ming talks to me, and he says, okay, show me your class schedule. Showed him the schedule. He said, okay, whatever you're not in class, you have to be in lab. That's rule number one. I'm like, what? How am I going to do my homework? He said, I don't care. Bring your books, bring your homework, because in order for you to learn the culture of the lab, how it connects to the world, the industries that it impacts, you need to be here consuming this all day. And I was like, that sounds like no. Because again, when somebody is expressing to you a different way to do something, the first reaction is disbelief. I didn't believe the $24,000 fellowship was real. Disbelief that agriculture is in fact business and all facets of science, include like it's all of STEM. Anything in ag is STEM, right? So I have this thing where I say I'm very much so STEAM. The A stands for agriculture, where for most people when they use that term, A stands for art. So started off my journey in the lab. Absolutely loved it. Plants became my refuge. I found myself graduating to the point where like I had a lab key. I was working in lab at 10 p.m., 11 p.m., midnight, 1 a.m., 2 a.m. by myself. At that time, his lab was in that building that was way at the top of campus, and I would make that walk by myself in the dark. That's how much I loved it. Oh my gosh. And it was a pivot from what I experienced that summer at a program called SMDP. SMDP, it triggered some grief in me because we were working with cadavers. I didn't anticipate that that's what we were going to be doing. I thought it was going to be like textbook learning and preparedness for medical, dental, pharmacy school. No, we were actually working with cadavers. And it was just a few years after my sister passed, and I wasn't ready. Couldn't do it. With plants, what I found was I identified that I can kill the plant and I can bring it back. And by bring it back, I mean, okay, because this was plant biotechnology. We were doing research where we were taking agrobacterium, which is a growing medium, to get plants to generate from the leaves, from the stalk, the here, right here on the plants. And I loved it. Oh my God. It was like, this is nothing like medicine where if your patient dies, some people do come back from death, but it's rare. It's a rare incidence. Most people, the human body, when it fails itself, you have to go and get some outside resource to try to heal it. So like now we're doing, I think the first person just got a fake heart transplant. Come on, you know if your heart is damaged, like you get one. Plants, you can get many. And I just absolutely loved it. What resulted in that experience though was going back home to talk to my grandfather. My grandparents were gardeners. My grandmother, my grandpa's born in 1932 for context, so you do the math. And they're from Mississippi. So they survived the Depression, very frugal. They had a hog pen and owned pigs. They had a lot of stuff. My grandfather was a hunter, fisherman. My grandmother was into fishing and gardening and cooking and quilting. Absolutely loved it. And so when I went home to talk to my grandparents about what it was I was doing in the lab, they were like, "Huh? You doing what with plants? You're infusing genes where?" Like they couldn't even use the word infuse. They were like, it's lab. Like they heard lab and it was just like this turn off. And the context of that, the historical context is that in general, if you look back on any USA studies, the Tuskegee study where they infected Black men with syphilis. So as a people, we are distrustful of medicine, doctors, labs, research. We don't participate. We are what's called a vulnerable population. So my grandparents' reaction being negative, and again, I like in my theme of videos, you'll notice that I talk about self, right? At that point, in 19 to 24 years old, a lot of your self is based on the family that you came from, whether it is you're accepting them or you're rejecting them, whether you want to be just like them or you just want to take pieces of them. Who you become is ultimately a result of the experiences that you've had or not. So I remember talking to my grandfather and he said, "Well, you in that lab ruining plants." And I was like, I'm not ruining plants. I'm trying to grow eastern cottonwood trees faster. I'm trying to get rid of sweet potato disease. I'm trying to develop tomatoes that stay ripened longer so that they don't have to throw away produce at the market." And he was like, "Did any of them people tell you they want any of that? Did the trees tell you they wanted that? Did the animals climbing in the trees tell you they wanted that? Did the organisms in the soil tell you?" And I was like, "What?" Because that's literally how I respond when people tell me, pause. I didn't consider. So at that point, let's transition to when I was at Penn State. I went back to my advisor and I said, "Hey, I had an interesting conversation with my grandparents. And I'm not saying that I believe what my grandparents believe, but I am going to consider it. That's who I am as a person. I will consider other perspectives." I said, and I thought, they kind of are posing a really interesting question. Have we actually asked people what they think about what we now know are official term GMOs, genetically modified organisms? And my advisor told me, if that's what you care about, you're doing the wrong degree. And I was like, what? I've been doing this now from 19 to 25, right? So 6 years. You're basically telling me that I've wasted time. But from his perspective, as someone who had been in that space 30 years, they never considered people. What they considered was wasted money, wasted effort, wasted energy. Example, hydroponics uses like 80-90% less water, right? So we want to develop hydroponic technology so that we can grow more crops with less resources. Like, that's just how they think. The whole time when you're in the lab in a silo by yourself thinking about how you can optimize this gene so that this plant does this thing, we don't consider the end user, the people. And so what that set me up for was a continued life of considering others. Again, it's something that started in my childhood. I didn't know that that was how I navigated the world. But I started to find articles about places where GMO crops are being grown, and the local community would go and destroy all the crops. I mean, millions of dollars of crops wasted. And I say wasted because the people acted on their emotion, their feeling around GMO. Sometimes driven by fear, sometimes driven by truth. Like, we don't know, right? People are not technically investigating this. But the research is not driven or even communicated with people who are impacted by the development of these GMOs. So I was having conflict, and I decided, in addition to my personal life, look at my other video, I decided, one, I don't know if hearing that I'm doing the wrong thing is worth me continuing to do it. So it caused internal chaos and confusion. I hopped around to a couple of labs. I tried to find a lab that was non-GMO, like where they were doing traditional agriculture. I couldn't get a spot. And so where I did get a spot, which looked like more of the same type of work, again, conflict, right? Internal clashing, feeling a lack of fulfillment about the inability to explore these other thoughts and processes. So what that led me to do was to quit my PhD. I thought at the time it was the worst decision I could ever make. I had no idea what I was going to do. I didn't know how I was going to make money because I had spent age 18 to like 27-ish doing this thing with plants and research. I had, in my head and what others said. I had basically become a scientist, and here I am rejecting said science. What I learned later is that my brain was already trying to figure out a different way to do science. I just wasn't at the point of accepting it, right? So again, my journey is about the things that prompt me to ask questions, that prompt me to be concerned and alarmed, triggered, sometimes absolutely triggered and spiraling, to lean into those emotions, process what they mean for me, and then chart what I'm going to do next.